I'm very pleased to be here with Johnny Martin,
Hi, Richard.
star of the show. I've just been here at your workshop here at the British Library. Just for people who may not know, you're known as a numbers coach. Like me, you're one of the partners here to the British Library's Business and IP Centre. And you run a workshop here called Get Cashflow Confident. And I know that you're really personally passionate about numbers and helping people understand the numbers side of business. So I thought I really had to catch up with you and to interview you. And I've just sat in on your workshop, earlier on, which was great.
Thank you.
Full room. I just want to talk to you very briefly a little bit about business, finance, and the numbers, and some real basic, simple things for many people who feel overwhelmed by the numbers, or perhaps who need to get more comfortable and confident with the numbers. Johnny, just first of all, tell me, why is it that you think that so many businesses struggle or get unstuck with the finance and the numbers side of business?
Well, I think there is definitely an issue that people, irrespective of whether they're in business or using numbers, in a leisure capacity, people get slightly nervous, shall we say, whenever those things start coming into the numbers front. But the thing is that if you're going to go into business, that is the language of business. And you wouldn't begin to start heading across the Atlantic in a boat if you didn't know how to read your chart. And it's the same principle with running your business. So, the fact that people don't get on top of their numbers and an understanding of finance, as a result, so many people don't start their business, which is a tragedy, or they start and crash and burn because they don't know what the numbers are telling them, or they haven't got any numbers. And the way around it, some people have, is they get a business partner to deal with the sort of financial stuff. And you wouldn't believe it, the number of times that people come up to me in the break at the workshop and say, you know what, someone help me with the business side of things, and they rip me off.
Right, and I've heard you say that a number of times, so clearly that downside, if you don't know the numbers, is really a problem. So it's you said it's the language of business, and I guess it's the language of when you, at the end of every year, you need to submit information and so on. So I think there's a number of things here to kind of zoom in on. Do you feel that many of us, from when we're very early on, often have not got a good relationship with finance and numbers, or think that we're not good at it? Do you think that's kind of part of the problem, or is it part of the problem also that we're not necessarily taught that everyday maths, household maths and business maths, is that part of it?
I'm absolutely amazed. I do a break-even calculation, showing people what break-even is, the point where your sales equal your expenses. And at the end of it, I ask people to divide, or I used to ask people to divide 16,000 by 8. I now don't ask.
We don't ask people because,
But what's really interesting, I think, is that I do a lot of work with universities who've got a lot of Far Eastern students. Right. And they are just, by a factor of 5 at least, more comfortable and more numerate. I think there is a real problem around basic numeracy. So it's kind of like if the numbers are the language of business, then, people are illiterate about the basic math, as it were. And so, I teasingly tell people, when I was at school, we had a slide rule. And people just look at me like I'm sort of from another generation. Well, which I am, obviously. But what I was just saying is that just mental facility with maths, I think is actually a big issue. So yes, you've got to have some core numeracy, sorry to interrupt you, but overlaying that is, of course, the jargon. Now, every industry has got jargon, but I have to say that the accounting profession, much like the life assurance profession and the actuaries, have done nobody a favour with the jargon.
So these terms that people might hear, profit and loss, there's
break even, or margins. There are different types of profit, and of course you can have more than one word meaning the same thing. So sales, revenue, turnover, they all mean the same thing.
Well, you said something very powerful in the workshop, a number of things that are very powerful, and I kind of want to just share a few things that might be quite useful for this, because these are lots of people who perhaps sole traders or small business owners or micro business owners might be watching this and might be just wanting to learn a little bit more for the business that they're running or that they're starting up running. You said something, and I've got to try and remember it, and I thought it was very powerful a couple of things. The first thing you say is that you can delegate responsibility, but you cannot abdicate responsibility. And I guess that means that it's your business, you've got to be in charge of the numbers. You've got to have an overview of the numbers, whether you have an accountant, a bookkeeper, or whatever. You've got to first of all realise that you're the captain of the ship, as I put it, and that, that you're in charge. There's some of it that you're going to need to understand yourself. You said that, and then you said something else very powerful, and I've got to try and remember it. You said there was three things here, and it was about understanding. Do you want to talk us through the?
Yeah, but there's three. I think there's three key aspects about your financial management. A, understand. Right. B, forecast, and C, manage the business for growth. And then sort of underpinning that, the other thing I was saying was that there are just three key areas of your business you've got to keep track on. You know, despite the best attempts of accountants to make it seem more complicated, you know, when you're running your business, you've got to keep track of your income and expenses, because that is your profit, your viability. You've got to keep track of your cash flow, because that's obviously what pays the bills. And then you've got to keep track of what the business owns and owes.
Right.
And I think those are three key areas.
Right.
Income and expenses, cash flow, and what the business owns and owes.
Right. And I'm just thinking that, and I suspect I might come back to you to do a couple of these talks, because I think it would be fascinating. Is it worth us starting, first of all, when you're starting or you're growing a business, I'd imagine one of the first things that you need to think about is how much you need to live on. And you touched on this again in your workshop. What is it you personally need to live on? What's your own personal circumstances financially? So you've got a baseline of what's viable for you and what you need to take care of. I'd imagine, is that one of the first things that you'd say to anybody who's thinking about running a business?
Very, very much so. I mean, all the cliches when you're sort of, I mean, it depends on your current situation. You know, well, not the great luxury, but a luxury a lot of people have now is that they can be in a job and start doing experimenting with the business, and can, you know, the sweetest thing is to sort of gradually migrate. A lot of people aren't necessarily in that position, and they've starting a business because they've got no other option. And then there's probably the third category who are leaving to set up because it's just not practical to do the two together. And in that situation, you know, you've definitely got to work out your personal budget, because the old cliche, it'll take twice as long and cost twice as much, applies, and you've got to make sure you've got enough money to pay the bills. So I mean, I met a woman at a startup loan event. She'd taken up a startup loan to create her own digital marketing business, and she was struggling because she'd used part of the loan to fund an office, and was now facing her rent payments at the end of the month and hadn't got enough cash.
Right. And you touched on this again, this workshop, this point. So first of all, do your personal budget, and then you've got to be canny with the cash. So in that particular example, he was somebody who the business from day one was draining a lot of money without her necessarily working out how she's going to make the money. So Johnny, what would be what's the first step then? Let's say we've done our personal. We know how much it is that we need to make. And let's say that, assuming somebody doesn't have a pot of cash and they've got this deep well of cash and so on, what would you say the first couple of things that you should think about financially? Is it about going about and getting an accountant? Is it about doing some financial projections? What for you is the starting point?
The starting point, I believe, is working out what your break-even is.
Right.
So break-even is the point where your sales are going to cover your costs. Right. And you want to calculate your break-even point, because that will give you a kind of reasonableness test as to, you know, whether you can sell enough at a particular price point to cover your costs, including your salary. So first of all, I would think people should calculate their break-even point.
So in other words, that will be, so what's the number of sales of, if I'm producing a particular product, let's say a clothing line, sandwiches or whatever, or training services. You've got to, how many of those do I need to sell in order to break even?
Exactly. So, and you know, how to calculate that is in my book. In terms of the calculations, but it's then just giving you a feel of how many you've got to sell at a particular price point, given your costs to break even. And a part of that calculation is, of course, the price. And this is where the numbers can help create your business, or what I would say, create your business model. You know, by business model I mean commercial model. You know, crudely, you know, who's got cash in their pocket that you're going to get out of their pocket and into your pocket. So you've got more cash at the end of the day. And a key aspect of that is around your pricing. So I'm a great believer in looking at who's really successful and copying what they do. So what do IKEA do? When they're developing a new product, they start with the price.
Right.
And I think
so looking at what other people are doing, what other prices, and to decide there where in the market that you sit, and that will give you some very useful information. So it gives you that kind of starting point.
It's almost the most important marketing statement about where you are. Because as you know, I mean there are in any particular industry there is a massive range of what people are charging depending on the whole proposition.
Right. And that's a classic one, isn't it, that you've said that, so that we've got this thing about price. The thing that comes up a lot of the time, and when we're speaking to experts like yourself, then is this keyword profit. And and all of this stuff took me many years, like probably many people who are in business, to learn. But there's that thing about what's it that people say is that turnover is vanity, profit is sanity, and cash is reality. Do you want to just touch on those points? I know you touched on them on your work on your workshop, but those points.
Well, I mean, you've in that question you've struck to the biggest cause of confusion between business owners and finance people and accountants, and this why is profit not the same thing as cash? Because this is what trips a lot of people up. So, if you're running a very simple fruit seller business, buying on a wholesale market, selling on a street corner, chucking away unsold fruit at the end of the day, then yes, the increase in cash in your pocket would be the same as profit. But as soon as you start selling on account, having stock, buying equipment, then profit and cash are different in the short term. And this gives rise to the term working capital. So this is what trips up a lot of businesses. You can have a really fast growing, successful business, but it runs out of working capital because the cash is tied up with customers, tied up in stock, less what you owe your suppliers.
Right, so in other words, so when you're in business, it might take some while. If I'm there and, as you say, I'm on the fruit stall and people are paying me cash as I go along, I know what I'm doing in terms of profit and cash, the same thing. But once I'm sailing perhaps a more complicated business, then what the challenge is that we have is that all of a sudden that there might be a period of time before people actually pay me for my service. So that's a challenge. And in fact, I think we've got somebody here back from your workshop who's up here, but we'll carry on nonetheless.
Oh, okay. So
it's kind of
cash is king. Well, we've got lunch rations. Thank you.
Good to see you.
That's really kind. Did you go all the way? That's really kind.
Dad says, "Oh, it's fine."
Okay, thanks.
Right. Okay. See, that's just evidence of what we're talking about. So we've just been running a workshop. That book, Cash for Your Books. Again, when you're getting actual cash in your hand, then and if you've got a straightforward business, that's straightforward. You know what you're making. But as soon as there might be a period of time for some people to get paid, all of a sudden you've got this gap between profitability and cash, and that's what can, I guess, kill some business. And I presume you've seen that.
Very much so. And that's why it's important to forecast.
Right.
See, that's where the forecasting bit kicks in. That you need to, and a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners struggle with the idea of forecasting because of the uncertainty. Because I say in my workshop, the only certainty is your forecast isn't going to be right. But that doesn't invalidate the principle and the value of planning and forecasting. The old military analogy, they all do their plan, and it goes up in smoke as soon as the battle starts. But it doesn't invalidate the benefit of the planning. And especially with this working capital issue, you need to forecast in the future to see if you need to raise more finance, because money people hate last-minute requests for finance. Right,
so there's a number of things here, Johnny, and we'll just touch on a couple of them here, and I'm sure we'll invite you back, because what you're saying is absolutely fascinating. So first of all, we need to understand, we need to feel comfortable about finance, know that it's part of business, and begin to understand some of these things that you've presented to us about turnover or revenue or sales. That's one aspect of it. Then there's the profit. Okay, that's once we've we've got the. I should let you explain this, but
you're doing.
But you know, so the profit's okay. Once we've taken on board our costs and so on. Okay, what's left, and then of course the cash flow. How much money we've got actually day to day. How much cash is actually in the bank. So there's this thing about understanding that, and then you said then there's a key thing about forecasting that people can be nervous about. I think one of the things that strikes me is that I get the feeling that you get two types of business owners. The types, and we saw some of them today here in your workshop, who seem to be quite comfortable about numbers. Perhaps they've got numbers in their background. People like yourself who just have that skill for numbers. Then you get people like me. I'm a bit more creative, and in terms of creative rather than a finance person, and numbers isn't so much naturally the case. Those people who are comfortable with the numbers, they may well have a grasp on that. But John, for those people who are a bit nervous about the numbers, or it's not as naturally their kind of thing when it comes to forecasting, what's the best? What would be your advice there? I mean, clearly, education workshops like these, or getting a book like yours, might be useful. Do you suggest that they go out and get a good accountant, a good bookkeeper? How should they begin to, because they might struggle with this whole thing about forecasting.
Right. Okay.
Have you got thoughts?
Okay, yeah. Well, first of all, just a small point, but physiologically, there's no reason why even a creative person like you actually can't do the numbers, because the part of your brain that processes numbers is the same bit that processes language. Right. So physiologically,
that's good news. Because that goes back to the thing you said.
But as we all know, mental issues can be as big as physical issues. So it's not a physiological thing. But in all seriousness, when you're doing forecasting, you're using typically a spreadsheet program. And just as an aside, while most forecasts are done in businesses using spreadsheets, my advice is always to use a proper accounting program to record the day-to-day transactions, just to be clear on that. So most forecasts are done on spreadsheets. So actually, and I hate saying this, a forecast is not straightforward. I mean, I hate it when the boiler repair person comes in and you say, "What's the matter with the boiler?" And they say, "Oh, it's a bit complicated." And you think, if you can understand it, I can surely understand it. But actually, with a forecast, you've got Excel to deal with, or your spreadsheet program, and then the accounting principles. So one way round that is to get a forecasting template that is already set up. And I mean, I've created one which we saw at the workshop, which is available on my website, which is just literally a plug and play type product. But if you go to an accountant, the trouble is that to do a forecast, they will be looking for £500 or £600 to build you a model, because it is time consuming, and that is the conundrum.
So you might need to spend some time finding out what kind of information you need, and there might be then a conversation perhaps between you and your accountant or what have you, or people who are knowledgeable about this, to find out what kind of tools are out there, and the ones that are comfortable and that sit with you and that are at the level of complexity, presumably, that your business is at. Is that
exactly? And I mean, there is now so much business support out there that and this is part of the entrepreneur, business owner mindset. You've got to sort of bootstrap and trade. So if you're making,
for those people who don't know, that's like when you're managing
trading,
yourself.
Trading stuff. So if you're making cupcakes, find an accountant and say, look, I'll do your month-end office party and supply all the cupcakes for your partners meeting if you will give me a forecasting template.
Brilliant.
But then there's also lots of enterprise support type businesses around where you can get a template. As I said, there is one on my website. Because it is a gap in the market. Right.
And I think what you said there is so powerful, Johnny, because I think one of the things is that when it comes to money is that we can bury our head in the sand. And you're saying actually there's workshops like yours, there's information, there's books, there's all sorts of different support. Go out there, talk, find out, by asking questions you become more knowledgeable. And so, but before we close, we've touched...
Actually, asking questions. I mean, as you know from my workshops, one of my big things is give people some knowledge, boost their confidence to ask questions. If you haven't been on a finance course or you haven't done an accounting qualification, there's no reason why you should understand this stuff. So don't be embarrassed. Have the confidence to just keep asking and asking and asking. And if someone can't explain it clearly, it's not because you're stupid. They probably don't understand it properly themselves.
And you said that in your workshop, and I think that's so key, particularly when you're going talking to people who will be either advising your business, they might be your accountant or perhaps somebody investing. Constantly ask those questions so you're absolutely clear, and you're going to, I guess we all learn along that journey. The last element that you talked about, so we touched a little bit about the importance that we understand. You've touched on a little bit about forecasting, and of course there might be data from other businesses. You might need to begin to look at the patterns over a period of time in order to find that. What's the last element about that? So there's that understanding that we talked about, there's the forecasting, and the third
is the managing.
Is the managing
for growth.
So, right, is the managing for growth.
So what I'm always keen people do is look at their business and financial systems not as a pain or not as an overhead or as
an extra chore, because it's often seen as a chore, isn't it?
But this is actually, look at them as assets of the business.
Right.
These will create value.
Right.
They'll either save you time, make you more profitable, and certainly if you get to the point where you're going to come to sell your business, good business systems, good financial systems will make your business more valuable. You know, behind every successful business are good business and financial systems.
You know, it's interesting, one of the things that struck me about your workshop, you started off with a lovely example of a particular well-known entrepreneur.
Walla Kiley,
who I think seems to be in the fashion design kind of business. And you made the point that I think that husbands, an accountant, other people around
dad's an accountant.
But you make that point that actually that's really important, that somewhere along the line of every successful business there will be that accountant, whether that's you, whether it's getting that advice and support. And I love the fact that you mentioned, swap, share, seek out other people who can help you with regard that's really important. But very quickly, because I know we're about to be kicked out for somebody who's going to be using this room for the next workshop. In terms of that managing thing, the first thing I got a sense of from you was that see it as a key part of your business. Don't see it as an add-on. Take that time. I guess part of that managing is actually about recording the data when it comes in. Don't wait for it to pile up. But any other general, just very quick tips in terms of when it comes to managing that? You said, for example, once a week, look at your...
have a regular business financial routine. And I suppose if you were looking for a top tip before we close, I think probably more cash is wasted by not getting agreements documented.
Right.
So, if you've got business relationships with your business partner or with suppliers or customers, make sure these are down in writing. I'm not saying necessarily a contract, because we all know every contract costs 700 quid from a lawyer, but make sure there's an exchange of emails setting out, great to see you today. This is my understanding of what we've agreed.
And get those systems in place. We're just finishing up. Yeah, so getting those systems in place and getting the advice if you need to. And your work, I'm sure we're going to be coming back to you again. Yeah. Your book, Johnny, just tell us the title of your book.
So that's Understanding Your Business Finances.
Let's hold it up here, Understanding Your Business Finances.
Yeah, take control of your cash flow.
Right, fantastic. And it's one of the things on my list of things to do, to read it through thoroughly and so on. I've been here to your workshop. But I think that's the other thing about it, isn't it? The thing that I've got a sense of this, that you learn step by step and your degree of knowledge increase step by step. And again, as you grow your business, that you'll need to check in and just make sure that you're ready for the next stage of your business, because presumably the complexity is going to increase.
It's very much event. I like to think of it as event based. So first of all you're looking at your break even and your forecast, and then when you get to a bit bigger you've got to deal with VAT. So there are these events that come along, and you need to, as you say, prepare for those as you go along. You don't need to know everything straight away, but just get up on top of the key things as you go along.
Brilliant. And your web address for people who are keen to find you or any of the tools in the workshop?
Yes, it's www.johnnymartin.co.uk. That's JOHNNY martin.co.uk, or at Numbers Coach.
Yeah, the Numbers Coach. Thank you so much for your time today.
And all the best.
Thank you. Take care. Right.